Hello, boys and girls. My name is Miss Wendy, and I want to share with you a very fun and interesting book. It's one of my all-time favorites since I was little, and throughout the years, it has been read so many times to so many people, and they have all enjoyed it. And I want to share it with you today. So, the book is called Charlotte's Web, and it's written by E.B. White. This book is one of the interesting facts about this book is that it's a classic novel and it was published in 1952. Wow, that's a very long time ago. But so many people have enjoyed it since then. So I want to first let you know some of the characters that are in here. The characters are Wilbur, Charlotte, Fern, Abel, Homer, Zuckerman, and Templeton. And the setting of this book takes place in the country, Zuckerman's farm, and the fairgrounds. And the interesting and the fun part about this book is that it's about friendships, affection, protection, and adventure, and also miracles. So before we begin to read this book, I want to give you some words that as we read along, you're going to see them come up, and I want you to know what the definition of them are. One of them is runt. Do you know what a runt is? So a runt is a dog or a pig or other animal that is the smallest of the litter. Which leads me to ask you, do you know what a litter is? I'll tell you. What is a litter? A litter is a group of young animals, such as puppies, born to one mother at one time. Shriek. Do you know what it is to shriek? When someone shrieks, they let a loud cry of fear, joy, or surprise. Ah! Another interesting word is sob. Do you know what sob is? Sob is to cry with great emotions. Like when you get hurt and you let out a really big sob because you're in pain. You're sobbing. It hurt. It's to cry with great emotion. Another word is injustice, which at the beginning of this chapter, you're going to see that a lot of injustice is taking place, according to Fern. So to be injustice is to be unfair. Another word is approach. Approach is to move towards. So when someone is approaching you, they're moving towards you. Another word is demand. Demand. So to demand something is to request something urgently or forceful. I demand that you come here right now, meaning you are telling them, you're requesting them to come urgently right now. Another word is whisper. Do you know what it is to whisper? To speak softly. You whisper, you speak softly. Another fun word is blissful. Blissful is to be completely happy. That's exactly what this book does. It is blissful. And our last word is giggle. I know many of you knows what giggles means, right? Giggle means to laugh nervously. Giggle. And now we're going to begin our reading. And as I read along, I'm going to ask you some questions to see if you understand or to expand your imagination. So let's go ahead and start with the first chapter. The first chapter is called Before Breakfast. "Where's Papa going with that axe?" said Fern to her mother as they were setting the table for breakfast. "Out to the hog house," replied Mrs. Arable. "Some pigs were born last night." I don't see why he needs an axe, continued Fern, who was only 8. Well, said her mother, one of the pigs is a runt. Remember we said that word, runt? One of the pigs is a runt. It's very small and weak, and it will never amount to anything. So your father has decided to do away with it. Do away with it? Shrieked Fern. You mean kill it? Just because it's smaller than the others? Mrs. Arable put a pitcher of cream on the table. Don't yell, Fern, she said. Your father is right. The pig would probably die anyway. So why was Mr. Arable going to kill the runt? Do you know? It's because it was very small and fragile. It was going to die anyway. So he figured maybe he would kill it so that it wouldn't suffer so much. Many people do that. Many farmers do that. Fern pushed a chair out of the way and ran outdoors. The grass was wet and the earth smelled of springtime. Fern's sneakers were sopping by the time she caught up with her father. Please don't kill it, she sobbed. It's unfair. Mr. Arable stopped walking. Fern, he said gently, you will have to learn to control yourself. Control myself? Yelled Fern. This is a matter of life and death, and you talk about controlling myself? Tears ran down her cheeks, and she took hold of the axe and tried to pull it out of her father's hand. Look at this picture right there. You can see her trying to pull it out of his hand. Fern, said Mr. Arable, I know more about raising a litter of pigs than you do. A weakling makes trouble. Now run along. But it's unfair, cried Fern. The pig couldn't help being born small, could it? If I had been very small at birth, would you have killed me? Mr. Arable smiled. Certainly not, he said, looking down at his daughter with love. But this is different. A little girl is one thing. A little runty pig is another. I see no difference, replied Fern, still hanging on to the axe. This is the most terrible case of injustice I ever heard of. Do you think Miss Arable will let the runt live? I see that Fern is very determined to stop this injustice. Let's see. A queer look came over John Arable's face. He seemed almost ready to cry himself. All right, he said. You go back to the house. I will bring the runt when I come in. I'll let you start it on a bottle like a baby. Then you'll see what trouble a pig can be. So if you thought that he was going to let it live, you are correct. When Mr. Arable returned to the house, half an hour later, he carried a carton under his arm. Fern was upstairs changing her sneakers. Why was she upstairs changing her sneakers? Remember, it was early in the morning. Where do you think she was going? Let's look ahead. Let's read along. The kitchen table was set for breakfast, and the room smelled of coffee, bacon, damp plaster, and wood smoke from the stove. Put it on her chair, said Mrs. Arable. Mr. Arable set the carton down at Fern's place. Then he walked to the sink and washed his hands and dried them on the roller towel. Fern came slowly down the stairs. Her eyes were red from crying. As she approached her chair, the carton wobbled, and there was a screeching noise. Fern looked at her father. Then she lifted the lid of the carton. There, inside, looking up at her, was the newborn pig. It was white. It was a white one. The morning light shone through its ears, turning them pink. He's yours, said Mr. Arable, saved from an untimely death, and may the good Lord forgive me for this foolishness. Fern couldn't take her eyes off the tiny pig. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh, look at him. He's absolutely perfect." She closed the carton carefully. First, she kissed her father. Then, she kissed her mother. Then she opened the lid again, lifted the pig out, and held it against her cheek. At this moment, her brother Avery came into the room. Who's her brother? Avery. Her brother's name is Avery. Avery was 10. He was heavily armed, an air rifle in one hand. You see this picture right here? An arm rifle in one hand, a wooden dagger in the other. "What's that?" he demanded. "What's Fern got?" "She got a guest for breakfast," said Mrs. Arable. "Wash your hands and face, Avery." "Let's see it," said Avery, setting his gun down. "You call that miserable thing a pig? That's a fine specimen of a pig. It's no bigger than a white rat." "Wash up and eat your breakfast, Avery," said his mother. "The school bus will be along in half an hour." "Can I have a pig too, Pop?" asked Avery. "No, I only distribute pigs to early risers," said Mr. Arable. "Fern was up at daylight trying to rid the world of injustice. As a result, she now has a pig." It just shows that what one can do happen if a person gets out of bed promptly. Let's eat. But Fern couldn't eat until her pig had a drink of milk. Mrs. Arable found a baby's nursing bottle and a rubber nipple. She poured warm milk into the bottle, fitted the nipple over the top, and handed it to Fern. "Give him his breakfast," she said. Look at Fern right there, giving the little runt, the little pig, his milk. A minute later, Fern was seated on the floor in the corner of the kitchen with her infant between her knees, teaching it to suck from the bottle. The pig, although tiny, had a good appetite and caught on quickly. The school bus hung from the road. Remember we were asking where was she going so early in the morning? She was changing her shoes because she was going to school. The school bus hung from the road. "Run!" commanded Mrs. Arable, taking the pig from Fern and slipping a donut into her hand. Avery grabbed his gun and another donut. The children ran to the road and climbed into the bus. Fern took no notice of the others in the bus. She just sat and stared out the window, thinking what a blissful world it was, and how lucky she was to have entire charge of a pig. By the time the bus reached the school, Fern had named her pet, selecting the most beautiful name she could think of. What do you think she named the pig? Let's see if you're right. Its name is Wilbur, she whispered to herself. She was still thinking about the pig when the teacher said, "Fern, what is the capital of Pennsylvania?" "Wilbur," replied Fern dreamily. The pupils giggled. Fern blushed. And that's the end of chapter 1. Are you excited to continue reading on to see what's going to happen with Fern and Wilbur? Now that we know this little runt's name is Wilbur. Now we will continue reading chapter 2 next time and find out more of the adventures that are to come. Thank you.